like having fun? No. Ask yourself this question. Do you enjoy the things that you find fun all of the time? Yes? You're a fucking liar. Playing Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze feels really fun the first time, and maybe the second time, but by the third time I just have the uncontrollable urge to just throw down the controller and start living life in its truest form. Go into the woods with your shirt off and run amongst the boar until they mistake you for one of their own. Then head into the office and make some phone calls. Shout into that fucking phone until you make that number go up and therefore increase your status amongst your fellow men. Whoa bro, you actually made that number increase incrementally? Fuck, that is sick. Then sprint back home at full speed and have your adoring, curvaceous wife worship your hardened magnificence until you just... Oh! God damn! I need to get a tissue. Okay, I don't want that. I don't even want to want that, but sometimes it kind of feels like you're meant to. Like if I spend too much time looking up patios in St. Louis, I feel like I'm wasting my life somehow. I should be living. I should be basking in the sunlight and making meaningful connections with every man, woman, and child. Wait, maybe not child, but here I am. A little fool. I want to just be content with playing a silly game for a silly amount of time. I want to be okay with spending a whole day essentially doing nothing. I'd say chances are you, right there, are doing exactly that right now. Piddling away your mid-afternoon or early hours of the morning with just time. Not spending time, just spent time. A blank in your memory, the bit before the later on. You sit paralyzed between the points of thought and expression, not really doing either. This is the time that no one thinks about, that no one writes about. Nothing to be gained, nothing to be lost. You're living through life in much the same way that a dead person is deathing through death. It's the Fly episode, it's Dark Souls 2, it's a 3-hour drive down the M5, it's living the same day over and over again, it's the deciding not to decide, it's forgetting who you are, it's the 64th episode of a 135 episode long podcast series about falling and falling and falling and drowning and falling and...
I can understand it. Be the beat bandit who bring heat for the mic. Unhanded. Whoever go after burn their hands and lips. A lot of rappers ran and abandoned their whips. It's just another day in the dunya. Don't leave your girl around B, he might swoon her. Up under the window, serenade her like a crooner. Stay ahead of the game and cut her off sooner rather later.
Hylics 2 is a classic-style RPG in which you lead a gang of passionate adventurers as they battle their way through an unknown land, killing enemies in turn-based combat, slowly making their way up from the bugs and grugs of me local pub to the grand high Mr. Weatherspoons himself. The danger seems great, but your willpower is far greater. You scavenge, you upgrade, you talk, you get talked to, you fight, you press a button to attack. And in the end, you bring joy to the land and free gas station weed to every creature on the planet. But what if one of those creatures decided to consume this Bolivian petrol station pack? Then, in their foolish naivete, they decided to double up with a couple of the old Dr. Perkies and to hell with it, a gallon of that slurp juice lean, and then they tried to depict the world around them. What kind of wild machinations could such a substance-addled mind possibly imagine? What singular strand of logic or coherency could survive when the concept of those things, and indeed the concept of conception itself, is melted away? Well, what you see is what we have left. Every single facet of Hylics' world, design, story structure, characters, visual style, hell, even controls, flies completely, directly, and proudly in the face of modern game design, to the point where you would easily be mistaken to think that this game came out in an era before the seamlessly blended cutscenes into gameplay or the proudly photorealistically rendered anal fissures of modern AAA titles, and equally away from the predatory monetary systems and artificial intelligence-produced marketing tactics to influence young children into stealing their mum's cards to put on Fortnite so they can watch Peter Griffin shred to the theme song of Five Nights at Freddy's. In fact, Hylics 2, the game I'll be talking about first for reasons that will make sense later, came out in June of 2020, a time that simultaneously felt like 3 months and 10 years ago. But why doesn't it fit? Well, I think that's obvious when you look at it. Also, it controls like a game from the 90s. It doesn't support controllers, but you don't use your mouse at all, including in menus. You have to manually tap through options one by one on your keyboard like an idiot. And I know that other such bare bones games have had this aspect as well, but here it just doesn't pass somehow. Maybe because this game isn't actually so bare bones, as we will get into. But aside from that, you can look to so many other things that read very strangely that make you want to answer the call for adventure, like a siren's song or your car keys after drinking a bottle of moonshine. Let the first example be the first thing you noticed, and I noticed when I first stumbled across the game on Steam. The sheer, unabashed, delicious, capital S style of the game. Every character, every single character, is a bizarre and wholly unique machination of distant, stranded concepts smashed together with, frankly, astounding confidence. Look at the core group of adventurers you control. Wayne, an icon, a legend in my mind's eye, a sloppy combo of Dung Beetle, The Simpsons, and quirky, ironic eye rolls. Pongorma, a stalactite, a fish, and a yeti. Desdemolm, a soldier, a slug, and a tulip flower. Somnosa, a caveman, a cowboy, and a sexy-ass woman. And this mishmash hodgepodge can be applied to anyone. Anyone. And anytime you enter combat, more often than not, you are greeted with a new combination that will surprise and, dare I say, delight you. A skull, a cyclops, and a bush. A rock formation, a rooster, a cloak, a flower, and a snail, a fractal, and a sleep-deprived, a limestone, a minotaur, and a disco, a peacock, and another drop of mercury, a pair of soulless eyes. My eyes when I see a pair of absolute bazonkers! The point is, I cannot even begin to unravel every mental connection between every stranded concept of how each character in this game is drawn and animated. I genuinely don't understand how one would go about creating this or any of these. It's incredible. It's genuinely incredible. It flattens me with awe. Everything that you see, every creature that you see, is really unlike anything you've seen before. They're all so abstract, but they all move, they dance, they wiggle, they express. They have a kind of presence that makes them so much more tangible than an abstract painting. They have a being, a form, maybe a mind, maybe a soul. There's something so magnetic about that. I need to see what this world is holding. I need to see where it takes me. And every single aspect of it, not just the character design, serves to that purpose. Take the lore, par exemple. The lore of Hylics is actually not particularly confusing. On the surface anyway. The world you navigate is pretty standard in that it starts out quite linear and then expands to include several different interesting locations for you to explore. The hierarchical societal structure is just how it be in the real world. You've got different people, and I'm saying people because I cannot be asked to say beings of amorphous form, so I'm just going to say people. And these different people all have their own little roles. They have relationships, they have jobs, they operate shops, they work in the mines. Some people are the bosses or other people. There's a mayor who's seemingly in charge. Pretty easy to understand. But what's not just hard, but actually impossible to understand are the fucking reasons for anything. Take Wayne, for example. Diving into the Wayne lore reveals some really interesting nuggies of information that we can chew and savor and around in our mouth with, but we can't swallow, because we can look at and appreciate pretty much anything in this world, but we can never truly understand that which is ununderstandable. And I love Wayne Island because it has so much intrigue. You are Wayne, but there's a Wayne Senior sitting on the roof, chilling in just the exact way I want to be. and hordes of Waynes on the beach, either doing the same dance move that me and my friends do at parties, or rolling around on the floor like me and my friends do after we get home from parties. There are also what look like Wayne Juniors sliding around, which begs a question about the evolution of the Waynes. Do they grow? Do they evolve? Do they start from slimy slugs and eventually grow up into a patriarchal padre? Is the Wayne we play as in Hylics 1 now the guy on the roof in Hylics 2? How are they born? Does this one squeeze out these ones while this one stands beside and scoops up the pieces of shit in the afterbirth? What are they doing here? Training? Training for what? To jump and spin in a circle? To roll on the floor like a wheel of cheese? You're the only one that does anything. Are the Waynes a race in this world? A hive? A commune? Do they sit around in a circle at night and smoke a peace pipe and tell each other how we're all the same but not really and all we need is love? And why do I care? Why do I feel like I need to know? This is applied to everything, not just the Waynes on Wayne Island. Why is there another island dedicated to TV antennas that have the power to enhance your charge-up attacks? Why is the entire world so disconnected with giant expanses of water separating any populated area, yet everything is so affected? People just know what happens as if deeply connected with the Earth in some way that clues them into major events. Why are there worlds within worlds? Why is there a physical afterlife that you can enter and leave at your leisure? Why can you eat a dead version of yourself for meat? Why are there burritos in trash cans that you can chew and swallow? Why? Hylics 2 laughs at you for trying to rationalize anything in the world. Anything from the items you pick up to the places you go to the connective tissue between those places. It always, in equal parts, confounds and delights me, and it goes beyond even just the world itself to how you interact with it. At 2 random points throughout the game, the whole thing switches up to an extensive and expansive 2D side-scrolling segment, complete with its own mechanics, combat, enemies, and life system. It comes completely out of left field and feels almost like an entire game unto itself, as if you're playing Red Dead Redemption 2 and literally all of a sudden it becomes bartending simulator and Arthur Morgan is serving cowboys whiskeys and trying to convince Karens that they definitely ordered a mojito even though they changed their mind halfway through waiting and now want a martini. And on top of that, the way the world opens up throughout the game is similarly intriguing, with you starting with very few mobility options and basically being as useless as these guys, and then these options slowly expanding. Firstly, you can dash through the air and then you can glide slowly back down, therefore increasing your traversal capabilities and allowing you to find more burritos in bins. And then you get the airship, which shakes things up completely again. You see the world from an entirely new perspective, from whole new angles that you wouldn't even think possible, because up until this point the map felt very 2D, very planar. But now we've extrapolated out a whole extra dimension which breathes a new life into the land. It's stuff like this that's just as important as the weirdness of the characters or the impossibility of the game's environments for that magnetic pull that draws me in, that makes me play more. You never know what secrets this game has to reveal about anything, including the way that you play the game itself. And anything that it does reveal or evolve is so fucking interesting and surprising that I just have to fall in. But I'm not just falling into the act of playing the game. Plenty of things have gotten me addicted like a little gaming gremlin. It hasn't happened in a while, mind you, but it still has happened a lot throughout my life. Either because of reasons associated with their gameplay or design, I've just kept glued to that screen. What I've really fallen into is the thought of Hylics itself. The world, what it could possibly mean. I can't get it out of my mind and I can't fathom why. Hylics has such a presence in my brain, born from its absurdity and abstract intrigue hiding around every corner, and it's that unique presence that has made me fall into the game in a way that I haven't been able to at all in these recent times. Because these recent times have been strange. It's been a time where the cynicism of modern games and art in general has become the most awfully and unavoidably apparent. Every game was what I described earlier, either needlessly indulgent in minor details because who needs real life anyways, or unapologetically manipulative because what else are you gonna do? Go outside? You literally can't. Now sit down and play the new season. As a result of all this madness, there really was this stale feeling in the air. It's a battle pass or a field of fully rendered grass, a microtransaction or a novel's worth of forced interaction. Every new objective or milestone didn't feel like it was providing anything to me except an excuse to ignore the world. And this feeling didn't go away when the world opened back up. If anything, it got worse. I got busy, man. I realised I had to work, I had to drive to places and do things, my social circle expanded, I found someone. These things aren't bad things, most of them are good things, great things, they're life things, they're progression markers to show that, hey, I am a person, look, I've done stuff, I've been here, I've met this person, I walked up this slope, I saw this person shopping in a Morrison's, I've looked at my finances like an adult, I've driven in silence because I didn't have the strength to stomach music, I've ate at this restaurant, I've drunk a pumpkin spice latte, I have a piece of metal through my nose. A lot of things have changed. But one thing that has stayed stagnant is my relationship with media, because I haven't really come across anything that has challenged what it takes for me to be impressed. But goddamn, Hylics 2 as a piece of art that stands on its own is really fucking impressive. The fact that it doesn't flinch or buckle or compromise to any ideas of what a game should be at its time. The fact that it doesn't have a stupid, forcibly sluggish section explaining controls and mechanics to you every time something changes. The fact that it doesn't care at all if you understand anything that's being said or done. That is really cool to me. It is a gigantic, middle-fingered, raging erection, bullnose, blunt-force trauma of a game that exists to challenge and conquest the boundaries of the medium. For the sake of being the unexpected, exploring the unexplored recesses of what the human mind could possibly come up with, to the point where it feels like no mind could come up with it at all. And therefore it exists as an incredible testament to the power of imagination. It took a familiar formula and transformed it into something beautifully indescribable. That is why I love Hylics. But that is not why I love Hylics. There's something deeper to this game that I still haven't unearthed. I can play weird fucking games all I want. Spending 5 minutes on Steam, you can find all sorts of strange, debaucherous creations coming from the deepest unmined parts of the human consciousness. These are games that are unlike anything conventionally created by studios, and mostly don't follow the trends of the current gaming worldplace because they are either made by a single person or a very small team. And to be fair, just because these unholy pillars to free time are unique, doesn't mean that they're interesting. And even the interesting ones can't hold a candle while wearing a nightie and saying, "Who goes there?" to Hylics 2. And to understand why, we are gonna have to do something that I never thought we would, and that I never ever ever thought I would ever have to. We're gonna have to reflect on the past. We're gonna have to learn something about who we used to be. We're gonna have to play Hylics 1. The first Hylics came out around 5 years before the second, and unlike the second, it was developed entirely using RPG Maker, a software commercially available and designed for consumer use in a much more accessible way than most modern programming platforms. Now, it ain't no Scratch, and so the games you make on it ain't no Super Fun Tennis 1 and 2, but by the nature of the software itself, you are limited to making only RPGs, and those RPGs are almost exclusively about cutesy anime people with horrifying eyes who go on adventures and have friends and push a button to attack. In essence, the framework is inherently quite limiting despite how expansive the marketing of the software makes it seem. If you're a huge fan of classic RPGs and only want to make one of those, then it's amazing. But for anything subversive or truly intriguing and unique, less so. It's great for weebs, but not for dweebs. Not for the people who like to break things down to the tiniest parts and rebuild them anew. So, you may be wondering, why am I even talking about Hylics 1 at all? What is so special about this game that is worth analysing or even mentioning in the first place? Well, it actually uses the inherent limits of its framework to its advantage, tricking the player into thinking it's an RPG Maker level RPG with its many dated quirks. The game is stuck at a tiny resolution, either relegated to the corner of your screen like a child in a dunce hat, or blown up to where every pixel is garishly visible. And just as in the second game, you can only navigate with the keyboard keys, clicking and clacking your way through the blocky alien environments. You feel blind, you feel so very limited, so fragile, so lost. It's as if you're peering into a world using a couple of those forbidden fleshlight tubes you can buy at aquariums. All this serves to provide what I would call a harsh experience. Harsh to look at, harsh to understand, harsh to interact with. Hylics breathes a certain chaos that is hostile. This is felt in every moment of the experience from the beginning till the end. The game starts with a nonsense creature on a nonsense island, a car half sticking out of the sand, an umbrella which I guess is there to stop him from getting sunburnt, a miscellaneous formation of rock that you can confusingly just walk through. And let me tell you, it starts how it means to go on. And I love that it does this. Each new area brings with it a plethora of inexcusable decisions for which there is no reason for it to be other than intrigue and subversion to what you would expect or what other games of its ilk would do. There are loads of points where the world unfolds like a Russian doll, revealing more and more expansion, even when you swear that you would be at the point where there cannot be another area tucked away within this one. And yet, like that guy you know who swears he's not racist but just gained a surprising knowledge on crime statistics, there is always more to uncover. There's an example where you start from the world map, then enter a large maze with patrolling deadly skulls, then access a warp to a separate island surrounded by a blood-red sea, then enter a separate map larger than the main map, which has several separate interesting locations, including a terminal that when interacted with takes you back to the original map on an entirely new island, then enter a house with Somnosa, then enter a basement within that house. Each of these levels of depth contain a variety of their own secrets, items, quirks, and eccentricities, such as a giant slobby slub creature of mysterious wealth and power on the Bloodsea map, a new power that gives you the ability to reinforce your friends during combat in the giant skull maze, and an enchanting black window in Somnosa's bathroom that hints to yet more secrets that lie just out of reach. Beyond this window, a phantasmagoric tableau unfolds. It reads, which fully understands and explains the thing I'm about to say in a much simpler and more concise way, almost as if knowing it exists at the end of a rabbit hole that pulls you inwards with a carrot on a stick. The world of the first Hylics is fascinatingly dense and impossibly structured to expand each point of detail out to reveal a whole new environment. You would never know that entering this maze would provide so many more areas than the one on the surface, and would still not know that in each inner area you enter there are yet more hidden, and yet more within those. And although the example I gave is the example with the most number of these levels, the fact remains that once you experience this sense of discovery once, it sticks with you for the entire rest of the game, and into the next one as well, because Hylics will always have more secrets and more surprises, because we as humans will always want to discover, and that within every phantasmagoric tableau there is a sense that there is something to discover at all, there is something to glean meaning from, no matter how meaningless that tableau seems. Anytime you interact with almost anyone, the speech of the characters is a completely scrambled, randomized jib-jab of ideas, and that extends to your inner monologue and certain points of narration as well. But it's not random in the same sense that it's meaningless. It feels like there is meaning there. It feels like there is something to grasp, because it's not as if they just slammed random words together in the dictionary, irrespective of verbs, nouns, adjectives, or even themes, ideas, and messages. Every time you want to regain your health and will, you have to sleep. And every time you sleep, you have to dream. And every time you dream, the same poetic message pops up. Amid the lilies floats the moth. The mole along his gallery goeth. In the dark earth. I've read those 3 lines so many times, both while playing the game and also over and over again in my head when I'm not. The fact that something sounding so soft and gentle springs out of the seemingly random void that is the way this game's prose is written, and that something so casually beautiful that's about our world, our nature, is dropped in the midst of the furthest imaginable thing from our world is just so fascinating. Why is this creature who has never seen our world, who has no inkling of what a moth is, or a lily, or a mole, be imagining such things in his sleep? It gives us just a glimpse of real, actual meaning. Just like with the monkeys on the typewriters, given enough time and a willingness to interpret, something can come out of the black. Now, what is the meaning of this meaning? What does this poem actually say? Well, it says that there's beauty all around, above the ground and below it. There's beauty in animals going about their business, and there's beauty in the privacy of that business. No one's watching, but whether they're amid the lilies or in the dark earth, they are there. And that's just what I think. And I think this applies to every other piece of text in the game, including and especially the scrambled ones. Even though you can say to me, Ethan, come on. You were being pretentious before, but now? These are literally mostly randomized lines of text. And you can say that. I still find each single example of so-called randomized text fascinating and interesting because of the meaning that can spring forth from that randomness. Why does Wayne dream of great natural beauty? Because there is beauty to be found everywhere, even in Hylics. Even in a game created by one man with rudimentary tools about abstract creatures completing abstract goals for abstract reasons, there is great beauty to be found. There are a lot of moments in the first Hylics that strike you with an intense sense of stupidity. Some of it comes from the jank that oozes through the cracks every time you try and walk through a gap that seems perfectly walkable, but in fact has a width less than the Planck length, and the fact that you can just become marooned on parts of the map, because when you die you get returned home, which can leave your ship on a part of the map that you can't access without the ship. So you either have to reload a save or sit there like a buffoon until the tree of time begins to wilt. But other aspects of resounding foolishness come from intentional decisions in the game's design. For example, there are genuine points of progression that you actually have to randomly stumble into by moving one of these gravestones, and chance plays a massive role during combat. You can have all the careful playing imaginable in the world and still get absolutely destroyed by just missing an attack or two and then having the most unfair shit happen to you. And then there's the issue with money. I remember in the early games scrimping and saving, killing every enemy I could in every area in order to save up as much money as possible. Partly because I wanted to buy a couple items, but mostly as a kind of insurance for later, knowing that as I go on the enemies will get harder, so keeping a reservoir of cash will help me stay afloat in the later game. But then the game made an absolute mockery out of my real world influenced financial prudence by just giving me 100,000 bucks in the later game, which showed me that the value of this thing that I was hoarding up for the entire game was not at all what I thought it was, and consequently proving to me that I really didn't understand the value of anything in this game world. I just didn't understand it at all. My parents used to keep chickens, and I like to think that they did a good job looking after them, as much as anyone can look after a creature who lives within a 5 square foot radius and who is only kept in the first place because of the ass treasure that they spit out every day. They used to keep them covered up so they couldn't catch bird flu from the other birds for half the year, and then for the other half they would clip their wings so they couldn't flow the coop, and they would go up there every single day to check on them and collect their ass treasure and make sure that they were fed and warm, and yeah, they still died. We've kept over a dozen chickens in the last 3 years or so, but no more than 2 or 3 at a time because of one important factor: my dear, dear dog, Sir Albus Williams. Ever since we got him, he has acted as judge, jury, and executioner to our hens, despite every measure we've taken to stop him in his warpath. Every spare minute he got out here was ruthlessly devoted to his innate predatory instincts. New coop? Who cares? New fence? Not good enough. Putting rocks all around the edge so he can't dig his way in? Fuck you! Eventually, my parents, in their aged wisdom, decided that it was better to just avoid subjecting innocent animals to a life of terror and buy their eggs from the supermarket instead. So after a recent canine-inflicted genocidal rage, they decided not to buy another hen. Happy ending for everyone except the slaughtered. And Albie, who's going to have to go back to humping random parts of his brother's body for kicks now. Okay, I've written a very silly sentence here, and I'm debating... No, I'm going to say it. I look at the first Hylics in the same way that a chicken looks at a dog.
What the fuck are you talking about?
A chicken cannot understand a dog because its mind is simply unable to understand the world around it at all. Just as I cannot understand Hylics because it feels like it's just beyond me, beyond what my mind can fathom in both an external and internal sense. Externally, because when looking at the game itself, we know that a person, a real person in this world, came up with all of this, which truly seems impossible to me. To have thoughts so untethered with reality, they must be a representative of the Conservative Party. And internally, because yeah, obviously all the systems and motivations of this world are not going to make sense to me, because the phantasmagoric tableau will continue to unfold forever, demanding further rationalization and more piecing together in a way that is antithetical to that world. You will never reach an actual understanding. But there is one thing that my chickens did know when my sweet little dog came sniffing around again. Just as there was one thing that I got the sense of in Hylics 1 but then knew for sure in Hylics 2. Fear. Fear of a chaotic unknown. Fear of that feeling of being lost and out of your depth in an antagonistic environment. Fear of the not knowing, fear of the doubt, fear of the not feeling, fear of surrender, fear of death. Fear of...
Gibby!
Here he is. He is the villain of both Hylics 1 and Hylics 2, the central reason why you're doing anything that you're doing, and the single most powerful being in the universe. He is an entity of mystical and practically incomprehensible ability who looks like the sun baby from Teletubbies after one too many Stellas in Hylics 1, and the sleep paralysis demon you see on your wall after 20 too many Stellas in Hylics 2. The impact that Gibby had on the world of Hylics can only really be described as godlike. Partly because you defeat him at the end of Hylics 1 and yet he returns in the second with a new form like a wrestler after a rebrand, but more so because of the sheer impression that he has on the world. Everyone knows who he is. He is able to erect enormous structures into the sky, and in the first game he has a giant space station overruling the planet like some kind of Death Star. But it's not his effect on the structure of the world I'm interested in today, but his effect on the structure of the people. In the first Hylics you had all these people walking around talking confusing gibberish that to me felt like coherent thought slammed through 50 different translations in different languages and then back to English, resulting in this random squabble. When I was playing that game, it felt like that existed simply as a quirk of the world and the design of that game. I mean, hey, it's easier to randomize speech than write it for every single interactable creature. The world is pretty random XD anyway, so why not apply that to the things people say? But on the other hand, you could have just had all these characters not be interactable, which would have been easier still. So there was actually a lot of added effort into this intriguing unpredictability. But also while playing the first Hylics, I didn't even think twice about Gibby, because aside from his goofy ass appearance, he just seems like the kind of king that people don't like for some reason. Or not even people, it kind of just seems like you don't like him. No one really points you in his direction and says, there he is, go and get him, like some kind of pious being concerned with the state of the world. you kind of just lead yourself into meeting him. And the only indicator that there is anything to meet comes from this nonsense guy at the start of the game who then appears at the beginning of the 3 acts. He seems to try and tell us about Gibby, but it's through this same filter of noise, so we really only get a generalized bad vibe from Mr. Moonface. Oh man, don't get me started about the people who deceive blatantly and own hideous prisons of dirt. Drives me up the fucking wall, honestly. But when you play Hylics 2, it finally pays off what this guy was trying to tell us in Hylics 1, because you get to see a before and after of Gibby's influence on this land as he grapples to get his rule back. And that influence is the chaos. Not the quirks of the world, but the chaos that's hidden just behind it. In Hylics 2, you don't have any of those same nonsense speakers I talked about from the first game. Everyone actually has written real dialogue, and they tell you about their lives, and you get to see a little slice of their strange, weird existence, and it's part of the drive that keeps you playing, because it's all very charming, and I assume that that was because it was a much more realised release than the first game, so it feels natural that more effort would be put into world building like this. However, there is a major beat in Hylics 2 where you kill who some might be fooled into thinking is the final boss of the game, Odozier. He resides at the end of an incredibly difficult area that seems to be the last area to explore on the map, and Bleeroll, the mayor of New Mondial, says that defeating him is the most important thing that has happened thus far in order to stop a greater power from being Sonic unleashed. But we were too late. After killing Odozier, well, more accurately transforming him into a puddle, he tells us that the ritual is already complete. And then, once again, we come face to face with Gibby, who brings something quite unexpected back into this world: the characters from Hylics 1. These people that I thought just existed for scope reasons are now populating the entire map, replacing every character regardless of quirks or role or status with a similarly nonsensical squarmgy mess of disconnected limbs and other parts. And when you talk to them, it gets really familiar and really depressing. I love the way this world felt because of its intentional unpredictability, that real sense of discovery. So when it's all replaced with boring, pointless, easy randomness, it's really quite saddening. And you realize in consequence that that is the point of Gibby, and therefore that is also the point of Wayne. You see, when I said everyone was transformed by Gibby, that was a little bit of a lie. Obviously you survive, and so does the occasional Wayne lava, which gives you just the slimmest of slim chances against this monstrous threat. But more importantly, it proves something about you. That confusing motivation that I felt between the entirety of the 2 games now becomes suddenly a lot less confusing. You're not fighting for no reason or for some unexplained lore reason that we can never really understand because of the obscure nature of everything in this world, and we're not even really fighting for any desired result to our position in that world. We don't want to be king, we don't want to be rich, we don't want justice or revenge or anything that we as humans strive for in our relationships and in our jobs. The one thing that we do want, the singular little thing that we are fighting for, is meaning. This road is very steep. I live in a town with a lot of ups and downs, but none are quite like this road right here, which I found out through very rudimentary calculations has an elevation of very roughly 40%. Whatever it is, walking up it feels like a stairmaster, and walking down it is a constant struggle to maintain your masculinity. But cycling up it? Oh, forget about it. You can cycle in a straight line or even moderately uphill, a lot easier than you can walk, but on a 40% gradient? Who would do such a thing? Well, that was me. I tried to do such a thing. In the month of June of 2023, I tried cycling up this hill at about 11 o'clock at night after an evening of visiting with a friend and video game playing and horrific takeaway eating. And I was cycling home on this hill, and about halfway up, sweat was gushing down my brow, breath pouring in and out of my lungs, legs swelling with the sweet sting of lactic acid. And something happened somewhere in my chest. I have a phrase for it now, major hemoptysis, but at the time I didn't really know anything except the fact that I started coughing up a lot of blood. All over myself, all over the pavement, all over the bike, hundreds of milliliters of it. Staggered here at the side of the road, miles from home, halfway up this fucking god-awful hill, unable to catch my breath and meeting with a harsh, bubbling resistance every time I tried. I was retching and gurgling in a way that I never even thought was possible. To be honest, I thought I was dying. So there I was, effectively drowning on dry land, and my first thought was, dear God, what is going to happen to my YouTube channel? What are my 200 subscribers going to watch while playing Paunch on the other monitor? Well, not exactly, but I bet you are wondering right now, why am I talking about this? This has so far mostly been a video about a video game that I very much like. And even though I have in the past dipped into lived experiences because I think that sometimes they can provide important context for how I feel about a piece of art, why would I want to bring up this thing that genuinely causes me a lot of stress to think and write about? Is it because it influences how I feel about Hylics? Well, yes. I didn't play Hylics 2 until about September of last year, which was 3 months after this experience, but I had played Hylics 1 a while beforehand simply because it just looked weird. And I found that when playing the second one, I had a very different perspective to when playing the first, which I could only attribute to this experience. But it hasn't just changed how I feel about Hylics, Hylics has changed how I feel about it, which is both why I feel like it's so necessary to bring it up in the first place, but also is what I find so amazing and personally rewarding about Hylics itself. I've never mentioned this on this channel before, but I have a chronic condition called cystic fibrosis. Maybe you've heard of it. It affects a lot of different parts of my body, but mainly my lungs and my increased vulnerability to infection compared to you normals. And since the events of June of last year, I found out that I have a different but related condition known as bronchiectasis, which basically means that my bronchioles within my lungs are wider than they should be, which makes the cell membrane separating the airway and the blood vessels much weaker. I also, prior to better judgment, used a certain amount of inhaled drugs throughout 2022 and into the start of 2023. And even though I didn't use them as much as some other people, I would be lying if I said I wasn't addicted to a certain extent, and I never should have. And on top of this, I was working a job at the time in which I was inhaling a large amount of unhealthy fumes on a day-to-day basis while exerting myself over a 12-hour shift pattern, meaning all of those fumes had a chance to get much deeper into my lungs than they otherwise would do. What I'm trying to say is that there were reasons for this happening. On a scientific, factual level, I bled from within my lungs because these factors were weakening my bronchial membranes, and when combined with the harsh exercise of cycling up that massive hill, it tore open. But these factors to me only became apparent after the fact. In the moment, as it was happening, it felt random. It felt like I was just unlucky. In these moments, you really only have two options. You can fight to survive, or you can fight for a reason why. In my case, I could fight to live. I got up. I cycled more than a mile home, uphill the entire way, trying to exert myself as little as possible and breathing as shallowly as possible as well, all the while coughing up bright red blood all over the place like some kind of demented, possessed child. And when I got home, I called an ambulance and went to hospital, and, well, I'm still here. The fatality rate for major hemoptysis is 25%. And so just as chance brought me so close to death, it also feels like chance is what stopped me from quite making it all the way. But you don't have a single, completely isolated event of major hemoptysis. That membrane is weak from now on. So all it's really going to take for me to have some kind of bleed again is either a bad infection or maybe even just inhaling too much smoke by accident. I now live in permanent fear of that bubble in my chest and that taste of iron in my mouth. But here is Hylics. It's so silly, I know it's so silly. But we often forget that this entertainment we consume all day does have an impact on how we view the world and our own lives. And sometimes, very rarely, when you're sitting in that place between thought and expression, when the time ticks away and you don't realize that you're aging and you're on the 64th episode of an 135 episode long podcast series about whatever, sometimes you see something that you didn't even realize that you need to see. Hylics is a crazy, crazy ass world where you have no idea what to expect, where round the corner could be something entirely outside of your imagination, where the very thing itself is a battle to understand anything. From the places you go to the people you meet to the very time frame that it exists within. The what, when, how, and who remain eternally a question. And that is how I feel in real life all the time. But the why? In Hylics, the why is what the game is. You fight for it. You might never know it, but you fight to find the meaning. My life has changed in some part since playing Hylics. Before, I always assumed that I could answer any question with the right circumstances, but now I've been in those circumstances, I know that I really can't. If I just stayed on that road that night instead of pushing through, I wouldn't have learned anything. Not while being alive can anyone really understand what it means to be alive. No real existential meaning can be found. Maybe. Hylics has taught me to try. I'm not religious. I'm not an atheist. Maybe there is a truth, and maybe there is a truth that we can grasp in this form of consciousness, and maybe we can make some progress towards that truth within this lifetime. I honestly don't know. But when faced with the fucking Gibby of meaningless chaos, when faced with the randomness of my own existence, I choose to believe. I choose to try.
Not afraid to die. Said I'm not afraid. See you smiling on the other side.
Sometimes in life, it's a lot easier to do nothing. When you die in Hylics 2, you get put into the afterlife. A place where you can heal your wounds and upgrade your health and will, and it's just a nice place to relax in a stress-free environment until you want to keep going. But when you first get there, Wayne is all alone, and he lies down like this until you decide to move him. It's hard being sometimes. Wayne is technically dead here, but I can see that he is still existing. I can see that his struggles and adversities are getting to him. But in his struggle for meaning, in his search for purpose, you always have to make Wayne get up. You have to find that motivation yourself. Hylics is about chaos. It's about finding meaning in chaos. It's about finding meaning in life. It couldn't be further away from looking or sounding or working like reality in any way, but to me, it genuinely feels like it in a way that makes me question so many things. Some of these things are very, very uncomfortable. And not uncomfortable in that they burn holes in my retinas with bright colours, or hurt my ears with discordant sounds, or even that they challenge my views of what a story can be, what a character can be, or even what it takes for me to be able to identify with a character. All of these things are, to an extent, true. But I actually love every single one of them because they all demonstrate to strengthen the real uncomfortableness of Hylics. It's uncomfortable how it makes me feel about myself, about the nature of being alive itself. It brings out in stark apparency the role of chaotic randomness that brought you into this world and can take you out of it, which leaves you rolling around in the corner for a while because the natural line of thinking starts at the hopelessness and ends at the simple defeat that is lying face down in the dirt. And it's really hard to get back up once you're down there, especially when you're busy. I got busy, man. I got a job. I have to drive to and from places. My social circle expanded. I met someone. I'm just not the person that I used to be. And because all of these things are life, they exist as part of the chaos. And because I embrace them, I realize that I need to embrace the chaos itself. There is no going back in life. As much as you might miss things that have come and gone, they all exist to make up and reinforce who you are. And so to continue down that path, to find out who you're going to be, you have to welcome the crazy, unexpected changes that will inevitably come along and will inevitably change you. That really is what Hylics has taught me. To understand that you can't have the world without Gibby. You can't have life without chaos. But you can still have meaning. You can still have hope. Thanks for watching.
So used to living so lonely, I've been my only. Can't live for so long. It's